So many of you know I talked to you all before about my time when I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and how they discriminated against me, how I received so many attacks while I was on those jobs. I worked for 3 companies while I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The 3 years I was there, I worked for a total of 3 companies. And I'm going to be describing the things that happened to me while I was there because I never divulged this information before. I did talk about it a lot, about how they mistreated me on the jobs, but I'm going to be talking about how I experienced employee discrimination and employee retaliation, sorcery, witchcraft attacks, all kinds of things. And I'm going to start with the job I worked at first. The first job I worked at was Capital Blue. I worked at a place called Capital Blue in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I worked there through a temporary agency called Health Now. Now, when I worked there, when I first got to the job, everything was okay. But the Lord had me start praying right away because he was telling me how his people were oppressed. They were not treating his people right. And so I would just have to pray. I would pray on and off, and I would feel sorcery attacks. Whenever I go into the building, I would feel all this confusion come over me. I was getting headaches. I would just cough. I would have fits of coughing sometimes. I would go out to my car. The Lord constantly had me praying. So I would skip my lunch breaks, and I would go out to the car, and I would just pray. And I just stayed to myself, and I would pray all the time. And I was doing pretty well while I was on this job. I was doing really well during training. It didn't take me long to catch on to anything. But while I was there were managers who were making things difficult for me. There was a particular woman who would always come around me, and she was always smiling in my face. She was always asking me questions, and every time she'd come around, I would feel this confusion come over me, and I would feel like I'm being attacked, like I would have headaches or things just hit me, or sometimes I would walk past and I would feel something just hit me in the back of my head, even though there was nothing there. And so sometimes I would get on my computer. When I get on my computer, all of a sudden I started noticing certain files where I would save all my documents, things that were important, that I needed, that was crucial and pertinent to my role. All of a sudden it would be missing. The entire folder one day was gone. And I'm looking for my stuff. I had none of this information I needed to access for my job. And so I had to borrow it from my coworkers and things like that. And my application would be all rearranged, everything would be messed up. And so I would talk to customers on the job while I was on this role. And I noticed that they would start calling me. They were calling from all over, but I would get a lot of calls from New York. A lot of them would call from New York, and they would sit on the phone for a long time. These people would keep me on the phone talking about nonsense, and I would try to get off the phone. They would not get off the phone. Even after I had already solved the problem for the reason of them calling, they would stay on the phone just talking about just random stuff. It's like they would just keep me on the phone. One woman had kept me on the phone for nearly 2 hours, and I would notice after these people hung up, I would start feeling really ill, like my stomach would hurt. I started feeling like I had to go to the restroom. I would feel nauseous, like I had to vomit. And the Lord was letting me know that they were attacking me. That he showed me that these are people who are part of the coven. They were part of their demonic network, and they were sending attacks to me because, see, they did not want me there. They did not want me there because I was there to pray for God's people to come out of bondage. Because as I noticed when I was at this company, a lot of the black race people, they did not have full-time positions there. I noticed that in the department I was in, majority of those people who had those full-time roles were Caucasian people. And they would get rid of the black people. It was like a revolving door. All the black people, they would just be there for a short period, and then they would leave. And the Lord was letting me know a lot of times they were taking things from them. They were stealing their gifts, and then they would get rid of them. They were only using them there to take from them. And so I kept praying. I was going to warfare. I really didn't know much about this because I had just moved there. I didn't know, I wasn't that adept at spiritual warfare yet, but I would just continue to pray. I would, sit out in my car and pray. I would fast on the days God told me. But they were attacking me relentlessly. One day I sat at my entire desk one day, and I just had a fit of coughing. I was just choking and coughing so hard. I felt like I was going to cough up a lung. I just start coughing randomly. Then other people would start coughing. I was so upset at God one day. I remember I went to my lunchroom. I went to the lunchroom to eat, and I saw some other people there, a group of about probably 3 black people laughing and talking about choir, talking about church choir. And I said, Lord, why am I sitting here? You got other people who are a part of the church, but they're not fighting. But I'm sitting here fighting for your people. And I'm going through literal hell here, being attacked. But they're sitting here laughing, talking about choir. And I was so upset that I went back and sat down and said, Lord, this is not fair. I'm tired of being suffering, and your people are not fighting. They should be helping me fight if they're a part of the church. And so God didn't really say anything. He just told me to pray. Because the people started coughing. We all were choking and coughing out of nowhere. And he says, pray. I said, no, I'm not praying. And I was upset, but I ended up praying anyway. And I just never understood why God was, at that time, I just didn't understand it. And so what had happened was they continued to keep attacking me. And it was becoming so blatant because every time this woman would come around, every time she'd be around, I knew she was having her cover members, just basically they were all calling, and somehow the calls would go to me and they would just always keep me on the phone. I started going over my breaks because we had something called adherence, where we would have to take our breaks at a certain time. And if we ran over our breaks, like if we took our breaks within a few minutes after the time we're supposed to take it, they would count that against us. And so these people would call me right before I was getting ready to take my break. A call would come in because we couldn't log off before our break. We had to log off right at that time. And so a call would come in always right before my break, and these people would keep me on the phone for like an hour, and I would be going to my break 40 minutes late, an hour late, and they would always say, oh, you're out of adherence. You're out of adherence. And so I started telling them, because I noticed this woman had went on vacation. She was the vice president, and she had gone on vacation. I think she was gone for like a week or 2 weeks. And I noticed when she was gone, none of this stuff was happening. And so I started putting two and two together, and I knew it was her because she was always so preoccupied with me. She would always come around me. I kept trying to avoid her. She was always come around me, and every time she'd come around, I would feel like I'm getting confused. I would feel confusion on me. I would start forgetting what I'm thinking of. I would draw a blank, and I knew she was attacking me. She was using sorcery and attacking me. And so every time when I'm coming out again, I would get on my computer, my stuff, everything was missing. And one day I could not find an important icon, and I sat on the desk, I sat on the phone talking security, IT, for like nearly a half an hour. And he thought it was strange. He was so befuddled, like, well, he didn't understand why my icon was missing. He couldn't find it anywhere. So they had to put in a ticket request, and they had to get it fixed for me. And I knew she was doing this. And so I emailed them. I sent up an email. I'm going to pull up this email so you can look at this email. So take a look at it. As you look at this email, I emailed the manager who was over her, letting her know my suspicions that these things were going on. And she just couldn't understand at this time. She didn't believe that this woman was doing this because, again, I don't know if she knew or not, or if they were all just playing a role, but the Lord had given me discernment and showed me that this was this woman who was attacking me. And the woman would often ask to project into my home. And she would do these things. She would just attack me. And so what they started doing when they saw that I was not leaving, because their whole agenda was to attack me, to cause me to leave the job. They wanted me to quit. So I tried my best to hold on because I knew God wanted me to stay there so his people could fight, so his people could be free. Not only that, I wanted to stay there because I needed a job. Like I said, I just moved there. I had just moved to the city, and I needed a job to take care of my children. And we had just gotten this new place, and I didn't want to leave. I wanted to be able to have a job. And so they started attacking my car. I had a car, I had driven down to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in my car. I had my own car that I had before I even moved there. My car that I bought with my own hard working money and spent and put my money into my investments. This car got me everywhere. It was a very reliable car. I was able to drive this car back and forth to New York. I drove it to Michigan. I drove it all over the place. And I was taking my daughter to see colleges and stuff like this. This car was in great shape. It lasted me. It was a very good car. So they started attacking my vehicle. They started attacking my car. All of a sudden, my car would start breaking down. It kept breaking down. I paid $500. It was very hard. I had to spend $500 that I sacrificed, and I paid for this car to get fixed, and then it would break down again. And so the Lord was letting me know they're attacking the vehicle. And I kept praying. One moment, they were attacking my finances. Even when I worked at this job, I can get checks, and all of a sudden my money would be gone. There was no account. I'm like, where's my money going? It kept going. And the Lord was like, pray over your paychecks. They're cursing your money. They're putting it on altars. They're putting your stuff on altars. Pray. And so they were attacking my finances. They were attacking my vehicles. My car kept breaking down. And what was the last straw? Finally, I lost my cell phone. They kept making me have confusion. So I went in the bathroom one day, and I left my cell phone there because I was so confused. I left my cell phone in the bathroom. It wasn't even 5 minutes later, and I remembered, oh, I left my cell phone. So I went back in the bathroom, ran back in there, and I'm looking, and I see one girl in the bathroom. I said, you see a cell phone? Because I don't see my cell phone. I had gone to the stall that I had just come out of, and I said, oh, did you see a cell phone here? She's like, no, I didn't see it. So I went downstairs to the security, and I said, did somebody turn in a cell phone? And he's like, no, no one turned the cell phone. So I knew that somebody had my cell phone. But I kept asking, look around, no one had it. I had no money. This is around Thanksgiving. We had no money. I had no money to buy anything for my family. My car had been broken. Once again, my car had broken down. After I just paid $500 to get it fixed, it broke down again. And I could not get it to start. It kept shutting off. My car was messed up. I could not get the car to work. And so basically, I told God, I says, I can't do this anymore, Lord. And he's like, come on. He wanted me to stay. I kept feeling the Holy Spirit just urge me to stay, crying. I'll just stay a little longer, And so I lost my cell phone was never turned back in. Somebody had my cell phone. That was gone. All of a sudden, I lost my badge, too. They really didn't want me there. I lost my badge. They didn't have my badge. So I had to work on a Saturday. I ended up walking to work. Fortunately, I didn't stay that far away, but I had no car anymore. My car wouldn't work, so I had to walk to work. And I tried to get in on a Saturday, and I didn't have my badge. No one would open the door. I just finally said, forget it. I'm done. I said, I'm not going to go through this anymore. So I left. I walked away from the job because I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't know how to. I wasn't really that adept with coming against these attacks, even though the Lord was showing me things I still hadn't been able to discern as much because I was just learning about all this stuff. And so it took me a while. It took me several months before I finally got another job. When I got another job, I was working at Benefit Vision. And this is the place where I met the infamous boss of mine who I'd spoken about many a times on this channel by the name of James Penny. And they called him Jim Penny. He went by Jim Penny. So he was the director of enrollment when I worked at this job. And so I had gotten hired by the job. The HR generalist had reached out to me and had me come in for an interview. So I interviewed with him and I interviewed with the director. And so after the interview, I talked about how I went home. I had this headache. I was so drained and just tired. I didn't understand it was a psychic attack at that time. So when I went to this job, but let's back up. When I first had this interview, they told me that I was going to be basically taking on the role. I was going to be training for a role, that I was going to be now taking over the role for this woman who was already there. She was an elderly woman who had been working for a long time. She'd been with the company for so long. She was the only one who ever managed this department. It was an administrative department. She was the administrator. And I was basically going to be training to take over her role. They said they were hiring me. They'd opened up this position because they needed someone to fulfill her role once she had left the company. So I was like, okay. So I was already promised me by this man, Jim, that I was going to basically take over that role. I was going to be the new administrator, basically running that entire department once this woman left. So it was a great opportunity for me. It was going to be a promotion for me within several months whenever she was ready to retire within that year. And so I took on the role and I was supposed to basically train under her. And it was okay. She was a sweet lady, but a lot of times I noticed she really didn't it's like she wanted to hold on to that role. And she really was not training me the way I needed to be trained. She would just feed me little stuff. And what I noticed a lot about them, bless their heart, but they probably didn't expect, it's like they didn't expect us to know much. They come from a different area. And so she didn't allow me to have access to the stuff. And so I said, I need to learn my role. When are you going to teach me everything? When are you going to allow me to learn? And so it took a while. I went months because she was not really showing me anything. I'd gone months and I wasn't really learning the role. And I was supposed to take over this whole thing. But she's going to be retiring soon. I kept saying, I need to learn. And I was letting them know. They were giving me all these odd things to do that didn't even pertain to my job. All these other things. I really wasn't learning my role. But they gave me all these other responsibilities. And there was a lot of conflict back and forth because I had two different managers. I had one during the day and I had one during the night. They would tell me different things and just conflicting things. And so I didn't know at the time, but this man, he was instigating a lot of stuff that was happening. I talked about before how he was bewitching me and stuff, and I knew he was bewitching me because whenever he would come into the building, all of a sudden I would get dizzy. He would come in the afternoon, I would feel this dizziness, I would feel my head spinning, and a lot of times he would I started having dreams about him. I started seeing him in my dreams doing certain things in the dreams. I'm like, why I keep dreaming about this man? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I didn't have any attraction to him whatsoever at all. I said, out of nowhere, I just started feeling thoughts about him all the time. And I kept thinking about him. It's like I couldn't get him off my mind. I kept thinking about him. I started having these romantic thoughts about him. Like I wanted to be involved with him sexually. I wanted to have a relationship with him. And I didn't feel that about him. I was not attracted to him. I had no interest in him whatsoever. And I didn't know much about bewitchments then, but I kept praying to God, says, Lord, take these feelings. Why am I feeling this way? I was feeling things happening to me in the middle of the night. The Lord was letting me know this man was bewitching me. Because he's bewitched me. He's doing other things to me. He was basically trying to manipulate my mind and my emotions. He was causing things to happen in the background. He was controlling people on the job to do things to me. And they were trying to make me look like I was basically crazy or a problem on the job, a problematic employee. And so there was this one man who would always go into his office. They were very close. He would go into the office of my manager, this person, Jim. This man would go into the office. His name was Joseph Allen. And he would always go into his office and he would close the door. And they would go in there talking. I didn't know what they were talking about. I didn't care. I wasn't paying attention. I was just doing my work. But I always noticed he would come down because I was very observant. I saw he would go in his office. They would always close the door. And so when I first got there, this man would I noticed everywhere I would go, I would see this man, Joe. It's like he would wait to the moment. It's like he was, how a person can time, or it seemed like they just somehow, whenever you get up, you always bump into them. And you start to think that they're following you around. Because see, it wasn't a coincidence. This was happening every time I got up. So whenever I would leave my desk, I would go into the bathroom. I would see Joe. If I go to the kitchen to get my lunch, here comes Joe. If I go to the other office to use the copier, here's Joe. And this kept on happening. It was going on for weeks. And it's like, wait a minute. This man must be following me or something. I started getting suspicious. Like, I didn't know what was going on. I thought that he was monitoring my computer. I'm like, how does he know when to get up? When I'm getting up, I didn't know what was going on. So I emailed the human resource manager. I told her, I said, I think he's monitoring my computer because he keeps following me around. And she talked to me. As you see, I'm going to show you this email here. I emailed her. And so this was the first incident that happened. I didn't know at the time this man was behind all of this. He was causing this stuff to happen. And she talked to him. After she talked to him, it stopped. I stopped seeing Joe every time I got up. He was not following me around anymore. So that ended. But when I was there, they were basically very nice, trying to lure me in, offering food. And so the Lord told me, don't eat their food, don't do any of this. And as I said, I lost my vehicle. When I was at Capitol Blue, they destroyed my vehicle. I didn't have a car. And so they offered me a car. The woman who I was working for, the administrator, she offered me her car because she had another car. Her daughter had bought her a new car. And she said, you can have my car. And so I was like, oh, wow, this is great. And it wasn't like it was a fancy, nice car. It was an old Mercury Sable. It was an old Mercury Sable that did not have air conditioning in it. The window did not roll down on the driver's side, but it was enough to get me around. And so I was like, I'm happy because they're offering me this car. And the Lord told me, do not take the vehicle. But I was disobedient because I needed a car. And so I ended up taking this vehicle from them. And I could hear in the spirit realm, somebody say, oh, great job, great job. And the Lord was letting me know that this man had got her to give me this vehicle because there's a way they were trying to get me to on their side. Because I was there, again, I was there to pray for God's people. Because this was another place where his people were being oppressed. This is another place where they're not treating his people right. They did not have certain people there. It was just a place where he wanted his people to be allowed to be there. As you know, these companies, a lot of these companies, they either did not hire people of color, or if they did, they had them for certain roles, servant roles, lower menial roles. And not only that, it wasn't just people of color, it was people who belonged to God. They were not hiring people who belonged to God. And God gave me the ability to infiltrate a lot of these companies because, see, when I talked about how, when I talk about my father had sacrificed me up to Satan. See, this is where God uses things that the enemy has meant for our harm. He turns around for his good. He turns around for our good and his glory. See, I was allowed to infiltrate a lot of these companies that were really not hiring God's people because they thought I belonged to Satan. See, the enemy put a mark over me where they thought I was part of Satan's kingdom. And so I was able to infiltrate these places, these companies where they thought that I was one of them. And so that's why when I got on the job and they saw me praying and bringing down their kingdom, fighting, praying for God's people to thrive and praying all this sorcery and this witchcraft and crap down, they would start to retaliate against me and mistreat me. And I would get all these attacks. And I was praying that the door will open for God's people because, see, these people were discriminating against God's children. These were companies that were ran by people who were in heavy occult activity. These people had made sacrifices. They had evil altars to get success and to get these companies. And a lot of times, like God says, this stuff belongs to him. Everything in this earth is his, silver and gold, the fullness thereof. And a lot of these people have stolen things from his children to obtain these wicked companies. And this is why God said, this is my stuff. My people are supposed to be here. They have rights to be here. And so when you take something from God's kingdom and you call it yours, and you know everything belongs to God. And he says, hey, wait a minute, this ain't your stuff. And that's what's been going on. These companies who have been dedicating themselves, they're companies that are not of God. They worship Satan, the owners, and those, the partners, and the investors. A lot of them, the owners, they've made oaths and pacts with Satan so they can get these companies. And they've obtained this wealth. They have stolen things that belong to God's children to obtain this stuff. And they're thinking that it's theirs. And they don't want to hire God's people. They want God's people not to have parts in it. But God said, hey, this is my stuff that you took from my kingdom in the first place. So my people have rights to be here. So that was the entire reason why I was infiltrating all these places. And I would go through so much hell. I would go through, they would literally attack me and mistreat me on these jobs. I would get sick. My children would get ill. This was the place where they caused all kinds of things to happen to my children. So after they gave me the car, they thought that I would be one of them. They thought they can get me in, wound me in. And I was not giving in. And so that's when all hell broke loose. My children started becoming ill. As you saw, I put in other videos, my children, they were getting sick left and right. I had to keep taking them to the doctor. I had to take them back and forth. Little freak accidents would start happening. My daughter had gotten beat down at this place where she was going to Susquehanna Township Middle School. And they had her, see, she was a special needs child. She was disabled. And they had her on a regular school bus. They did not have a special ed bus for her, so they were in the room. And when she's on this bus, this girl who's a normal child got into an argument or an altercation with my daughter, and she beat my daughter down in the school. She walked, the argument started on the school bus, and they got off the school bus, and the girl followed her into the school building, and she basically pummeled my daughter and beat her down. The principal herself called me and told me this. She beat my daughter down. My daughter suffered a concussion. That's how badly she'd been beaten. She suffered a concussion, and I tried all my best to get someone to sue that school. I tried to sue the school, but no one would ever take the case. Whenever I tried to file a lawsuit for all the wrong they've done to us, their people, their little network, of course, their little network stands by them. No one would ever take the case. I could not sue them. I could not file a lawsuit. Even though the school was in the wrong, I could not file a lawsuit. And so the Lord was letting me know that they had attacked my family, that the job where I was on, they had caused these attacks. My children were getting physically ill. I would have to take them back and forth to the hospital for everything. They would have strep throats. They would have all types of sickness. My daughter would have unexplained illness. She would start vomiting. Her stomach was hurting. I had posted a video on my other channel where my daughter was throwing up and vomiting profusely, and she would not stop. This had gone on for weeks, and she had lost a lot of weight. My daughter was already a small girl, but she had lost even more weight because she could not hold down food, and she was still having problems back and forth. But when I posted that video, it got over 20,000 views. And I disabled the comments after a while because there were so many people comment. I was so upset at God during that. I hadn't grown spiritually. I was so mad at him. I was basically speaking evil and angry at him because I didn't understand why I was going through this. I didn't understand why he was letting my children suffer this way because these people were attacking me. But I put that video up there. If you ever want to see it, it's still there. My daughter was throwing up. And so I thought I'd post that video because, see, the Lord wanted it to be exposed. Because, see, when the kingdom of darkness is exposed, when their behavior and activities are exposed, they don't like it. The Satan does not like to be exposed. So once I post that video, it stopped. My daughter stopped throwing up. But even though every now and again, she'll still have an issue. But the Lord, basically, he was showing me all of them. They had set up all the stuff. So my kids were getting into trouble. They were getting sick. My son started having legal problems. He was having problems at school. All the people, all the teachers and stuff, they were mistreating my kids. We were having issues where all of a sudden they were getting sick and they were missing a lot of days of school. I talked about this before, and they were retaliating us. It was coming from this job, and their coven. Their entire network was coming up against me because I was there to pray for God's people to have access to the companies because God said this is his stuff. And so, as you know, things kept on happening. And so it got to the point where they were getting ready. The person who I was training under all that time, learning from her, who I was supposed to already been promised that I would take over her role when I first got into the job. When I first was told that I was supposed to take over her role, she was getting ready to retire. And so they had this other woman. The boss named Jim had asked me to train this woman by the name of Judith Cherry. And I first thought that she was supposed to be helping me because he told me, oh, she'll be a backup to me. She's going to help me. And you know what happened with her? I talked about her before, where when I trained her, she came in late, did not tell me, and we ended up got into this issue because she did not tell me. If you look at my video where I talk about wicked and unreasonable men, it was her who I was talking about, where she basically I had stayed over late because the boss asked me to stay late to train her because I thought she was supposed to be backing up to help me for my role because that's what I was told. And so she came in very late, did not care, did not say sorry or anything. And she was very rude about it. And I asked her, I said, are you ready to I've been sitting here, I have children at home, I stayed late for you. She didn't care. And then the next day she put something on my desk talking about diabetes as if that was an excuse for her behavior instead of apologizing to me. And I basically emailed the manager, and they made it seem like it was my fault. Everybody was always taking the side of everybody else, even though they wronged me. They would take their side, and they just basically were causing things to make me seem like a problem. And the Lord finally let me know that they were doing this because they did not want me there. They were trying to make it seem like I was problematic. So when it came time to the woman to get ready to retire, they made this announcement that she was retiring, that this woman who I had trained, Judith, was going to be taking over the role for the position. And I was upset. The people who had trained me, the woman who had trained me and the other worker I was with, they were all looking like, well, why didn't they announce you? You're the one who's supposed to have the role. And I'm like, I'm the one who'd been training for several months. I was there. I was promised that position. That was the only reason I stayed there and went through all that hell, because I had wanted to leave many a times, especially when my children were getting sick and we were going through all these attacks. I had wanted to leave, but I only held out because I thought that, hey, things are going to turn around. I'm going to have this promotion. And so I questioned the human resource manager, Aaron Swanger, at the time. I said, well, what's going on? I was promised that role by the director himself when he hired me. He said I was going to have that role. I've been training for several months. It was confirmed that I would have that role. She said, well, I don't know anything about that. But she's like, basically, we haven't made our decisions yet of what's going on. She had some excuse. I don't remember exactly what she said. But I emailed this man by the name of Kevin Dunn, who was the manager over their department. He was the top manager. He was the one who, because they were having this acquisition. And so I emailed him to let him know what was going on. So here, I'm going to pull up this email right here. So if you take a look at this email, You see how I emailed him and told him everything. I felt like I was being retaliated against. I said it was unfair because I was promised this role. I've been training for this role for several months. And all of a sudden now that they're giving this role to this other woman who was just basically came to the department, was training under me, and I felt it was wrong. I emailed to him because I thought he was going to resolve the issue. So what Kevin did, instead of resolving the issue, all he did was just forward that email to the human resource manager, Erin. And of course, she basically took the email and passed it around the entire department. She shared that email with everybody in the company, pretty much. It was not, she was not discreet. She disclosed it to everyone because people would come up to me, regular workers just come up to me, oh, I saw your email. I'm like, what? You saw my email? And I felt this was just very, just very unprofessional. And she had a meeting with me, and she was talking about how my character or something about how I was very unprofessional, and I was always a professional person. And she was saying these things, and basically they were retaliating against me because I shared the email. Everything started changing once I shared the email. I started noticing they were getting really upset because I shared this email. I says, I'm professional. You shared an entire email about my private situation with the entire company. And she says, well, we can get rid of you at any time because this is a company where it's no fault and we can get rid of you anytime. Basically saying all this, and Jim was in the office with her, and I was just so upset. I went downstairs and I broke into tears. And I went down there and I went into the office and I talked to this man, and I says, you need to tell me the truth. Are you planning on getting rid of me or what? And he says, well, it's not working out. And he told me himself, he disclosed me that they were gonna have me train this other woman. And in 2 weeks after they had her trained and found someone else to replace the role, I guess my role, they're gonna get rid of me. So that was the whole thing. They were basically retaliating against me. And I should have just stayed and just basically just waited it out. But I had gone through so much hell there, me and my children. And I was so devastated. I said, I'm gonna leave. I trained the people that told me to train. I written up the entire employee manual because no one knew how to do the job. I was the only one who knew how to do the job because the only person who solely ran that company for the department for years, probably 30 years. She was the only one who knew how to do the role. And I had trained under her herself. She taught me everything she knew. And so she taught me because she's expecting me to take on that role. And she thought I was going to take on the role. And I basically wrote an employee manual because they asked me to write a manual to show the people how to all the new hires, how to take over the function of the role, because they didn't want to be in the situation where they had no one to show them how to do it. They didn't want to ever have one man only know how to do the job. So I wrote the employee manual for them, and I left them with the employee manual after training the two people they told me to train, and I walked away from the job. I turned in my badge and I left. And so I was devastated after that. And I didn't have anything. My mother had to take care, basically send us money. We were struggling, and they were attacking us left and right. And I finally got another job where I was working at Aetna. It took months, probably 6 or 7 months, where I had no money. I had to ask the church for money and food, but the Lord wouldn't allow me to take money for churches and none of this stuff because all these people, again, are affiliated with these evil networks. And he let me know if you take anything from them, they're going to hold it over your head and expect something from you. And so it's like you're being initiated into their kingdom when you accept something from them. So I had to depend on God to take care of me. And so when I finally got this job at Aetna, that was the last job I worked at Aetna. I got this job at Aetna. And when I first got to Aetna, I basically was not, the manager was not training me. He basically had me doing, I would go into training, but my manager wouldn't allow me the opportunity to basically get experience to do the things that I was learning in training. He had me assigning PCPs for nearly 4 weeks, just doing the same old mundane stuff, even though I had a variety of roles to function, variety of functions to basically manage for my job. And I was not getting the information I needed. I was not allowed the chance to shadow with the senior rep. And then I was like, I'm letting them know, hey, I need to learn this while I'm here, because the trainer was telling us that we should be working on this stuff now while we are training. So that way, if we make any type of errors, it wouldn't count against us. This is the time where we need to be learning everything and actively acting in our role, so we would not forget the things that we were learning in training. He wanted us to exercise that stuff, but he was not giving me the opportunity. The manager was not allowing me to train. And I was catching on very quickly. I had moved on. I knew how to do these PCPs. He kept saying, oh, learn these PCPs. I knew how to do it. I knew how to do it right away. It didn't take me long. Within 2 days, I had perfected the PCPs assignment. And all I'm doing is learning how to assign PCPs. You wouldn't allowing me to basically learn how to enroll newborns or do any other aspect. I was not looking at the CVS reports and all these other things, the CAP recon reports. He was not giving me access to any of that stuff. Like I said, the role consists of so many intricate functions, complex things that I needed to be learning at that time during my training period. He was not giving me the access. And again, this was another place the Lord was telling me they're very racist. They're very discriminating against his people. They did not want his people to thrive. I was getting attacked while I was there. I would have the same old problems where my computer would shut down randomly. It kept shutting down. My applications would not work. Sudden passwords, all of a sudden my password that was working just the day before, it would not work even though I hadn't changed or anything. And we would have to keep resetting my password. Other people were working and functioning. And they were just it was like territorial. They didn't want certain people to thrive there. And so I was sitting there wondering, I was getting so frustrated because he was not allowing me to train and work on, get access to all this stuff. He kept giving me the same mundane stuff to do that I was doing for 4 weeks that I knew how to do, had perfected it, and I was not allowed to work on anything else. Then this other woman who came in, she was a young white woman who came in after me a month later. And right away, he started letting her work on all these different things, giving her access to everything, giving her access to PCPs, learning all the different reports, managing all the files she shadowed numerous times with the senior rep. And I'm like, wait a minute. I says, I've been here longer than her. I've been here over a month before she has, but she's already gotten access to do all this stuff. But you keep telling me I had to keep doing PCPs. And then I would go to the manager, Lori at the time, and I would email her and talk to her, and she was saying, oh, well, we'll just work on your productivity, work on your speed. She wouldn't do anything about it. And I knew that they were trying to set me up to fail, basically. So I sent out an email. This has gone on for a long time. This has gone on. And they were making me ill there, the same old tactics, the same old stuff. So I sent an email to the human resource, and I filed a report. As you can see, I'm going to pull up this email right here. As you can see this email, I'm pulling this up. Look at this email. So as you see, nothing got resolved. Nothing got resolved. My daughter started having seizures out of nowhere, and the Lord let me know it was the man who was attacking my daughter. He did not want me working. He was coming up against me, wanted me to basically not have a job, didn't want me to have any money. He was still attacking me. He was attacking my daughter. My daughter kept having, she was having seizures. I had to keep asking the boss, could I miss work, take time off work? He was telling me everything was in jeopardy. I was getting hit from every area because I had come to do God's work, to fight for his people, to have access, and these people were retaliating against me. And so I end up having to put in my 2-week notice. As you look at that letter, shows the 2-week notice. I was ready to leave the job because God was ready to judge. And so I walked away from the job. And the Lord told me that this man who had caused me to lose the job, who kept having my daughter have seizure, he was supposed to come and give me money. He did not. He sent me a $60 check, and I could not pay my rent, which was $1,400. And during that entire time, I was having all hell from every end. They did not want me there. They were following me around in cars. Sometimes police officers would sit outside my car flashing their lights. Random cars would just follow me on the road, would just be following me. And I would just have neighbors putting feces on my car, attacking my car. My vehicle got attacked there too. Brakes went out. I couldn't take my kids to camp. We couldn't do anything. We sat stuck in the house for months. My mother kept trying to give me money. And so finally I had enough. I said I couldn't afford to live there anymore. I had to move away. I had to go back to Ohio. And that's when I went back to Ohio, the seizures continued. The seizures had continued. And then it led to my daughter, my children, my son getting taken out of the house. So as you know, I never talked about all the stuff I went through while I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, when it came to the jobs. But you can see right here, these are the jobs. You saw the hell that I went through on those companies. And see, it comes to a point where there has to be accountability. And see, the reason why God is allowing this stuff to be exposed right now, because see, he's judging everybody. All those people who contributed to attacking me, all those people who called me up on the phones, customers, even the customers. And you see, it continued. Even when I was working at United States Postal Service, they had the customers and people attacking me there where I could not thrive and I couldn't stay on the job. Everywhere I went, the entire covenant network come up against me because they want things. They don't want God's people there. They want to do the work for Satan's kingdom. And see, this is God's stuff. And he's attacking all of those he's going to judge all of those who do not want his people to have anything, because he said this is his earth and everything in it belongs to him. Not only that, my children were taken away out of the home for something that I did not do. You had me take accountability for something that was not my fault, and you knew it. Whether this man had, you can make excuses for him and say he had the mind of a toddler and he's a narcissist who's stuck in an emotional state of a toddler and a child. The thing is, he's a 50-some-year-old man and he needs to be held accountable. Just like all the young boys and girls who you put in prison every day and you lock up and you make them accountable, even though they're children. You're making children accountable for things that they have done. And see, the kingdom of darkness has taken from me. This is why God he's ready to judge. He wants you to make it right. Yes, he's a God of war and he's a God of peace, but you did me wrong. That's the thing. You did his anointed servant and prophet wrong. And if you haven't seen by now, you should know by now that God is on my side. They've tried to kill me numerous of times, more times than I can count on both of my hands. They've tried to give me heart attacks. They've attacked my children. They tried to run me off the road. They've caused my cars to break down, and the brakes will go out suddenly on more than one car, on two cars, on 2 occasions. My brakes went out on my car where I could have crashed, but it was only God's grace and his hand that helped me. My children have been assaulted and attacked. My children were mistreated and picked on in school. My children were made ill and sick. They attacked my children physically. They destroyed all my physical possessions. They attacked things in my house, attacked my cars. They kept me without jobs. They blacklisted me, pushed me out of jobs, attacked me on jobs, and had me have to leave the jobs where I could not have money. And I would sit there for years. I would sit there for months and years before I can get another job. When I did, the network would come up against me again. And this is what God's talking about. He saw all this. This is why he's judging, because see, you have not made it right. Yes, my kids came home, but there has not been restitution from the kingdom of darkness who has taken things from me. Not only that, you have held me on altars so I cannot move forward and go anywhere else. Companies where I've left a long time ago, he said they've been holding me on altars. They've been taking things out of me, taking my knowledge out of my brain, attaching themselves to my soul so they can take on things from me, putting their burdens upon me, taking things that belong to me and my children, taking things from his people all along. You've been taking things from his people, but you don't want them to work. You don't want us working in your companies, but you've been stealing from us. You stole from his people. This is what he's talking about. And see, you have not made it right. You're not God giving us what you owe us. See, there are people I just heard recently where there was a settlement made because a young singer had spoken out about something that happened to her woman. A singer named Cassie had spoken out about something that P. Diddy or someone had done to her while she was basically, I guess, when she was in a relationship with him, he had abused her, done a lot of things, and they basically came to a settlement because she filed a lawsuit against him. See, there are people who have filed lawsuits for way less than the hell that I've gone through, the hell that me and my children have gone through by the entire kingdom of darkness. And see, this is what God's talking about. You have not repaid. You have not settled. You have not made it right. See, he is a God of judgment. Just you're not fighting against me. This is his hand and this is his power. And there have been things that you have done. And see, this is why I use this channel to expose everything. You might try to block up everything, but you can't. You can try and do it all you want to, but the truth is going to be revealed. He says what's hidden should be revealed. What's spoken in the closet should be shouted amongst the rooftops. You have done wrong to his people for many years, and God used me as his servant, his prophet, his anointed servant. He has sacrificed me and my family to fight for his children, to have justice, so that his children can have justice, to save you and to get you to repent, to get you to change your hearts. And many of you have held on to your evil and your wickedness. You tried to cover up your sins, and you've done evil for years, and you have mistreated me. As a result, me and my children have sat here and in bondage for many years without anything. We had no money. We had no jobs. We had no transportation. They took our vehicles from us. We had to sit in a house in the summertime. We had nothing to do. We were ostracized, rejected. Our children, my children were attacked. We were ill. We were tormented. We faced shame. All of this because of what you have done. And this is why God is judging. This is why you're seeing a lot of stuff happening all over, because a lot of you have done these things and you've come up against God's children. You've mistreated them for years. And not only that, you attacked his anointed servant and prophet. He wants you to make it right. Sometimes it's not enough to just say sorry or you owe retribution. When you do something wrong, you're supposed to fix it. You're supposed to compensate the person that you have done wrong. When you know there has been wrong that has been done. When there's an injustice that has been done, I have been discriminated against. I've been retaliated against. I've had things stolen from me. I've been attacked. I've been persecuted. I've been assaulted, me and my children. And see, this is why God is getting justice. He's getting judgment on the kingdom of darkness. You need to make it right. It's not going to stop. You cannot defeat God. Let go of the pride and start changing your hearts and make it right.